All right, everybody, this is the Horn Takes Podcast, your Texas sports talk destination. I am your host, Sean Redfern. We are here outside the 40 West Studios. Fly on my mic, man. That's crazy. Go on, Fly. We're having a great day. It's a beautiful weather outside today, so we just had to come out and sit outside. We have got 6 more Saturdays until Texas football, folks. And I know some people are going to say it's 7 more Saturdays, but it's not 7 more Saturdays. The 7th Saturday is a game day. So I don't even think you can count that one. I mean, we're talking the game goes off on the 7th Saturday. So technically, we just got to get through 6 more Saturdays before we get to Texas football. I'm excited about that. I think we got a great show today. We're going to continue our 2024 position preview with the big humans on the offensive line. It makes me smile to talk about those guys. And we're going to give our thoughts on SEC Media Days, how Sark did, how Quinn did, just some of the reactions that came out of SEC Media Days. We'll talk about those things too. Before we get into that, check us out on Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube at Horn Takes. You can listen to us on podcast at Apple Podcast, iHeart Podcast, Spotify Podcast. You can check us out at horntakespodcast.buzzsprout.com. If you don't have any of those things, you're just living under a rock, but you have the internet, you can get us there. Position groups, baby. We've been talking about the position groups. We've done the quarterbacks. We've done the running backs. We've done the wide receivers / tight ends. Now we get to do those offensive linemen and round out the offense. As a former offensive lineman, you guys know I'm excited for this preview. If you listen to the show at all, you know that I believe that games are won and lost in the trenches. Skill position players, there are some great ones out there that are sort of transcendent, but for the most part, as long as you've got some guys that can hold on to the ball, catch the ball, run with the ball, see the field a little bit, you can be really, really successful. And I'd add in there, throw the ball. Find guys that are open, get them the football. I think quarterback is probably one of those skill positions where the talent can separate itself greatly. But I will say this, a really talented quarterback without a good offensive line, not going to be near as productive as they would be if they had a good offensive line. So the offensive line makes the offense go. If they can't block up front, they can't protect up front, they can't make holes for that running back up front, they are not going anywhere. And so huge part of the game is having an offensive line that can do those things. And one of the biggest question marks for the University of Texas when Sark arrived was offensive line. They were awful. They didn't have enough offensive linemen. And I don't say they were awful. They were so just maltreated. I mean, like, there wasn't enough offensive linemen to have a spring game with 2 teams on either side of the ball that first spring for Steve Sarkisian. That's how bad the offensive line situation was at the University of Texas. There's some good players to come out of that group, by the way. We'll talk about some of those in a minute. But that's not a problem anymore. They have done an absolute outstanding job in a very short time of recruiting and developing offensive linemen to the point now where we've got 4 or 5 starters coming back from a group that paved the way for over 2,600 yards in rushing last season and over 4,000 yards in passing in 2023. So this group is experienced. This group is talented. And a lot of that is credit Coach Sark, Coach Kyle Flood. They've done an amazing job. This is a top 5 unit in college football, according to PFF. I'm sorry, this fly will not leave me the fuck alone. He's about to get dead. But yeah, they're a top 5 unit in college football, according to PFF, which is just a grading system for those of you that don't know. I don't even know what it stands for. Professional football, maybe? Performance football? Something. I really don't know. I should know. I need to go do that. I'm gonna look that up. Well, I do know that they rate positions, they rate players, and Texas is one of the top 5 units in their ratings coming back into 2024. This group is big, averaging 6'4" and 324 pounds across the starting 5 for this offensive line, and that is another thing that sort of plagued Texas, sort of at the end of the Mac Brown era and through the Charlie Strong era and through the Tom Herman era. They recruited a lot of guys that were sort of projects physically. Now, all offensive linemen are projects. There are very few guys that are going to come in as a freshman and give you quality starts, quality performance as a freshman in college. It's one of the toughest positions, in my opinion, to jump from high school into college because the speed of the game is just so much different. You don't play guys in high school generally, and certainly not week in and week out, play to play throughout a game. You don't play guys as an offensive lineman that are that talented, that much speed, that much strength, that much technique. It's just a completely different game. So for an offensive lineman to come in as a freshman and start and give you lots of quality is just kind of rare. Uh, and so generally what you want to do is you get these guys in there, you develop them for 2 or 3 years, and they play their junior and senior year. They go on to become NFL draft picks. That's what you're shooting for, right? And then it's not going to work out for all of them. And there will be those that come in and you can immediately put them on the field because they're just that physically talented. But what those guys were doing, as opposed to what Sark and Kyle Flood are doing, they were bringing in guys that are weighing like 270 pounds, 275 pounds, 280 pounds. He's bringing in a lot of 300-pound plus guys. And the problem was they just never developed into those 300-pound plus guys that could be athletic, move the way that some of these guys move at that size. And it just really created this vacuum of quality depth at the lineman position at the University of Texas. Stark and Flood have come in, and that's all they're recruiting is big guy. I mean, these dudes are freaking huge. We'll get into some of the younger guys a little bit later in the show, but it's crazy. We talked about the athleticism. We talked about how big they are. Now we'll talk about the athleticism. They're really good feet, really good hands on these guys. The development, the technique for these guys just improved so much from year one under Sark to where we sit at today. The projected starters for the 2024 season at left tackle, he's been a staple since year one for Coach Sark. Kelvin Banks Jr., he is a junior. He's part of that outstanding 2022 O-line class. And he's one of those guys that we talked about a little bit earlier that can come in and start day one. That's Kelvin Banks. He has started every single game since he came to Texas. He is a future first-round draft pick without a doubt. He's got 27 starts under his belt heading into his junior year. Big, athletic. He could do it all. He's 6'4", 320. He's mean. We saw those clips back in the Red River Shootout during 49-0, where he just is mowing people over and just really taking it to the Oklahoma defensive front. That's the kind of dude this guy is. Like I said, he's going to be a first rounder. He's a great guy to have guarding your backside if you're Quinn Ewers. Let's move on to the left guard position. We got Hayden Connor. This guy's got 27 starts, all at left guard. He's another big and 6'5", 320 pounds. And I think what's so special about Hayden Connor is every really good O-line needs at least one guy that's just nasty. You know, kind of the nasty one, the one that just kind of gets under defensive lineman's skin. Maybe he gives that little extra push. Maybe he goes a little bit through the whistle. You know, you coach football players to play from whistle to whistle. Maybe this guy is a guy, this nasty one on the offensive line that goes a little bit past the whistle every single play. You got to have one of those guys. And I think Hayden Connor's the nasty one for this Texas offensive line. He's got kind of just a mean. It's funny. You see his pictures, you know, his roster picture and just not pictures when he's on the field. He looks like the most happy, cuddly, like big dude you could ever think of, like just a big kind of teddy bear. He gets this all the time. I know he does. Oh, you just look like a big teddy bear. You get that dude on the field, though, he's ready to crack some heads, and he's ready to be a little on the edge of unsportsmanlike, I think. And again, I think you need that on an offensive line. He's definitely that guy. He kind of reminds me of Casey Studdard. Casey Studdard was that guy back in that 2005 run for Texas. Just the mean sort of, you know, wrestler type dude. That's what Casey Studdard was to me, and I think that's what Hayden Connor is to this offensive line. Senior Jake Majors is going to anchor down the middle again. It seems like he's been here forever, and I think this is a great place to have experience. You got to have experience in the middle. The center is such a pivotal position for offensive linemen and making the correct calls on the defensive alignment, getting the correct calls started across the entirety of the offense. Well, a lot of people don't know this about offensive line play. You call a play in the huddle, and you break it to go out to the line, or you're up on the line already in a hurry up situation, and the play comes through, uh, that's not the end of it for the offensive line. There is a lot of communication that has to take place between the offensive linemen after they get to the line of scrimmage and see what the defensive front is. So the center pivotal in all of that communication, he gets it started by calling out the defense and letting the offense know, the rest of those offensive linemen, sort of what rules they're going to apply to that play in this particular front. So uh, Jake Majors obviously been doing that for this dude has 41 career starts. He started every single game since he's been at Texas, I believe. He's a pretty big body there in the middle as well, 6'3", 315. To me, Jake Majors is kind of on the same path as Christian Jones was in terms of his development. I think those were two guys that got thrown into it so early in their careers that it wasn't fair. We talked about it earlier. You don't want to have to play freshman offensive linemen. And in the past, Texas has had to do that because they were the most talented guys on the roster. And in some cases, there just wasn't a lot of guys on the roster. That first year at Texas for Steve Sarkisian is sort of personifies that. It just didn't have a lot of guys. So these young guys had to play, and they weren't ready, and they struggled. Christian Jones is a guy that, and we'll talk about it a little later, but he's a guy that, I mean, he was kind of, I don't want to be mean, but he was kind of bad early on in his career. And I think Jake Majors is kind of on that same trajectory where he started out pretty rough. I mean, he not bad, not terrible, not a huge liability, I guess, but just not what you would really want out of those positions. And now he's developed himself into a guy that I think is gonna. I mean, he's gonna be on the Remington watch list. He's gonna be one of those guys. He may be standing there holding that trophy at the end of the season. He's that type of guy. Just a ton of experience, and that is again super important at the center position. Over at right guard, we got junior DJ Campbell. DJ Campbell was just the headliner of this 2022 class we keep talking about. I mean, you got Kelvin Banks, who's been an All-American ever since he's been at Texas, a freshman All-American. He's going to be a first-round draft pick. A lot of people or draft pick. A lot of people do not know DJ Campbell was actually more highly rated than Kelvin Banks coming out of high school. I think where DJ Campbell struggled to get on the field early was certainly not in the physical part of the game. It was more of the mental part of the game, just knowing where to be, knowing what to do, the correct calls. We talked about that earlier. Everybody's got to be on the same page or bad things happen. If the offensive line is not clicking, all is one unit. Uh, Quarterbacks get sacked, running backs get hit behind the line of scrimmage. A lot of that, and we saw a lot of that stuff when DJ Campbell was in the game early on in his career. He started all 14 games last year at right guard, got a lot of really good experience. DJ Campbell is a absolute plus player in the run game. I mean, this dude is mean. This dude is mowing people over. There's a lot of pancakes happening because of DJ Campbell out on football fields on Saturdays. When he understands where to be, who he should be blocking, he is and this is passing game as well. He's certainly not a liability at all in pass protection. I think more of his issue in pass protection is just, again, knowing where to be and who is his assignment. But when he knows those things, holy cow, he is tough to beat physically. Another just absolute big giant kid, 6'5", 320 pounds, 330 pounds. I mean, he is a beast across that front there for the Texas Longhorns. And I think, he just now finally saw the field last year, won a battle with Cole Hudson, I believe. Maybe Connor Robertson last offseason to really nail down that starting right guard position. And obviously got a ton of experience. So I think we're going to see an even better DJ Campbell in 2024 than we did in 2023. And then over at right tackle, this is the new kid on the block. You got Cameron Williams. Again, I've said it 50 times, I feel like already, and I'll say it 50 more. Also a part of that elite 2022 offensive line class for Texas. He has one start in his career, but he's played in 22 games, played in 9 last season. 6'5", 335 pounds, which sounds massive, but he's actually down from 360 last season. So Cameron Williams has really, at least to this point, sort of seized the opportunity that he's been given by the absence of Christian Jones moving on to the NFL. he sort of said, I got to get my body right. I got to get ready to play 14, 15, 16, 17 games maybe. And he lost about 30 pounds, and that's big on him, big on the strength and conditioning program there at Texas. Big and powerful. Is just there's only so many things you can say about offensive linemen, and I kind of feel like I'm repeating myself a lot. But man, these dudes are just big and powerful. He is certainly capable of picking right back up where Christian Jones left off as a really uh, big piece to that offensive line last season. The next five, and these are my assumptions. I don't know 100%. These types of things can go either way. But I think the next five, you look at the tackle position, I think you got Trevor Gooseby. And remember how I said we're going to talk about some of these young guys and just how big they are. Uh, Trevor Gooseby is a redshirt freshman. He is 6'7", 315 pounds. So 6'7", and he looks really good at 6'7", 315. I mean, for an offensive lineman, this kid looks pretty jacked, pretty in good shape, man. And so he got some room to grow is the point. I mean, I think Trevor Gooseby flies himself, gets into the nutrition, gets into the weight room. I mean, he could be sitting 335, 340 and still being athletic. He played in 2 games last season, so not a lot of experience there. We'll talk about this in a minute. There's a few question marks along this front as we go into 2024. But moving on, Andre Cajo, another guy I think could step in at tackle. He's a redshirt freshman as well, 6'6", 340, big dude, big powerful dude. He has not stepped on the field yet, and that's certainly a concern. I mean, it's one thing to have the guys that you think can go out there. And by the way, you want 10 guys. I mean, I know last year Kyle Flood said we got 8. That's good. We've got 8 guys we can play. I think you want 10. Honestly, if you can find 10 guys that you are not afraid, you have no concerns whatsoever about putting in a college football game, you make it really, really tough on a defensive front for 4 quarters. I don't care how good they are or how deep they are. You can rotate 10 guys at offensive line. You're in a good spot. So it'll remain to be seen for Andre Cajo if he can be part of that 10 guys that we're talking about. And Kyle Flood may have a different philosophy. I mean, I think you really want 15, but that's not realistic. 10 is probably somewhat realistic. So we'll see how that works out. I think a lot of these guys we're about to talk about and have just talked about that aren't starters, those guys are going to get a lot of playing time early on this season. The preseason sort of out of conference, minus that Michigan game, not really too difficult, I don't think, for this Texas team. So I think what we'll see is a lot of big leads at halftime and a lot of guys playing in the second half to try to figure out, who do we think as we move into the SEC can really help us, and who are we going to just go ahead and say we're going to throw a red shirt on this guy if they already don't have one. Along the interior, you got Cole Hudson. I talked about him a minute ago. He's a junior. He's part of that 2022 class. He wasn't one of the ballyhooed guys in that 2022 class. Nonetheless, he started 13 games at right guard as a true freshman. Again, pretty much out of necessity more than his ability, and that's no knock on him. We've said it a million times. There are very few freshmen that are going to show up at offensive line and be able to provide you with a really positive experience there. I mean, you're not going to get a whole lot of great production out of freshman offensive lineman. He's 6'5", 310, another big kid. He played in 9 games last season. So certainly a lot of experience in that interior. And I think Cole can play center. He can play guard, obviously. So that's another thing you start to look at with these offensive lines. Who can play multiple positions? It's probably not as important in college as it is in the NFL, but you see it all the time in the NFL. Guy gets hurt, and some dude slides in from tackle to guard, and some other guy comes. It's all about finding your best players, your most talented guys, and then sort of developing them to be able to play multiple positions. And I think we're starting to get to the point now where Kyle Flood can kind of start to do that with a lot of these offensive linemen. I think a lot of these interior guys somewhat interchangeable. Move on, you got Neto Umeozulu, redshirt sophomore, again, 2022 class. He was sort of one of the 4-star, I believe, kind of right there in the middle of that class. They brought in some really highly touted guys, Kelvin Banks, DJ Campbell, and then you had a lot of guys kind of sitting there in the middle that were 4-star, high 3-star type guys, and then there was a couple of lower rated 3-stars. But again, a lot of these guys have played a lot of football, and a lot of them are really, really talented. He's 6'4", 330 pounds. He played in 3 games in 2022, 5 last season in 2023. So some experience there. A lot of guys really like Neto. I really liked him coming out of high school, and I think it's just that these guys not getting play or these guys not starting and getting the bulk of bulk of the plays there on this offensive line is really just a testament to me of how much talent is there and how good the development has been there. It's not a knock on those guys. Neto Omiozulu could go play at a lot of colleges right now, be the starter, but he chooses to stay there at Texas, and that's a good choice, I think, for him. Good choice for anybody, in my opinion. We move on to Connor Robinson, another one of these inside guys. He's a redshirt sophomore, also out of that 2022 class. 6'4", 310 pounds. Played in 4 games in 2022, 10 games in 2023. So you look at this group, the starters, lots of experience, and these guys have been playing together for a long, long time. 4 or 5 starters coming back from that offensive line last year that was really, really productive, allowed the offense to be really, really productive. And then you got a lot of guys filling in behind them now that have experience, they've got talent, they've had time to develop. So I think you look at this Texas offensive line, it's certainly one of the strengths on this team headed into 2024. There's a few guys I think might be some dark horses for some PT. It's going to be tough. And that's fine. Again, these are all young guys. And again, you don't want to have to play young guys. And right now, Texas doesn't, and that's a good thing. But I think you might hear some of these guys or might see some of these guys out on the field early on this season, maybe. Brandon Baker, true freshman, really highly rated 4-star, 2-star or 2-time All-American out of California. He's a 6'4", 315-pound kid. And these guys, man, they just don't look. You see these guys without all their stuff, all their body armor, their knee braces, their elbow braces, their neck rolls, all that. You just see them in regular street clothes. I mean, they're big dudes. They're not cut out of stone like a lot of these skill guys are, but they're in good shape, man. And Brandon Baker's another one of those type dudes. I think he's got a shot to maybe see some action there at the tackle position. Daniel Cruz is a guy, true freshman. He was a high school. This guy, pancake machine in high school. He played tackle a lot in high school. A lot of his film, at least, is him playing tackle. He's not going to play tackle in college. He's definitely, to me, interior O-line guy, 6'3", 310 pounds. Another one of those dudes, kind of like Hayden Connor, I think. You see his roster picture, and you just go, man, that dude looks just like the most happy, nicest kid ever. But you see his film from high school, and it may not be like this in college. Who knows? But you see his film in high school, man, and he is just mean. He is just burying people all over the field. I really like Daniel Cruz when he committed, and I think he's a guy that might again get some PT. Kind of shallow at the center position. I think that's a spot where he might be able to get in on the field kind of early in his career and kind of start that experience and development process we've been talking about. Another young guy that I think you might see this year, Connor Stroh. He's a redshirt freshman. He has not seen the field at all. He's a true redshirt, the old school rules redshirt. This guy's 6'7", 350 pounds. Just an absolute mammoth kid. We might get to see him. And I don't know where he fits. I don't know if he's an outside guy or an inside guy. I mean, I kind of think at that height, he's probably on the outside, but who knows? But those are my 3 guys. I think dark horse guys, and these are just all guesses by me. I'm not plugged into the. Me and Kyle Flood don't talk every day. In other words, so there's a few question marks I think about this team. I think the first one, and we kind of talked about it, is Cam Williams ready to step up and fill in for Christian Jones, who was a guy that was just another guy. We say Jags. He was just another guy. He might have been like not even that good at some points in his career early at Texas. Man, did he develop under Kyle Flood. I said it a lot of times. this coaching staff has done an outstanding job of developing these guys. The players have done an outstanding job of buying into the culture and being, doing their part. The coaches can't make these guys do anything. They can say, "Hey, here's the culture. Here's what you want. We want you to be. Here's what we need you to do." The guy's got to go out and do it. And man, he obviously did because his senior year was bang up, drafted in the 5th round of the NFL draft. Congratulations to Christian. It's been really cool to see his journey at the university, and he's a guy that probably could have moved on. I mean, he got beat up by fans pretty bad early on in his career. So is Cam Williams ready to step in and can he produce? He's probably not going to produce immediately the way Christian Jones did as a senior, but can he step in and give us enough of that the rest of those guys sort of make up for it, and that offensive line just keeps clicking. And then another thing is, we talked about those younger guys. How many of those guys can really go play? How many of those guys does Kyle Flood really feel comfortable with? I think we're going to find out the answer pretty quick against Colorado State. I think we're going to see it's going to be hot. It's an afternoon game. I think it's a 2:30 kick. If it is, it's going to be like it is a 2:30 kick, and it's going to be ridiculously hot. I don't know. Most of you guys that are listening to this have probably been to a Texas game in September, August, mostly September. It's just the way the calendar fell this year. But man, it is so hot at Darrell K. Royal. Even I remember games sometimes, some years, like on into October, where it's just really, really hot. So it's going to be bad. So they're going to be rotating guys, and we're going to get to see real quick who are the ones that can play, who are the ones that can't. Those guys have been patiently waiting. A lot of those guys have been passed up. We talked about a couple of guys that have started early on in their career and got passed up by just more talented players that have developed themselves a little bit better. Can those guys step up, fill a role, and provide some quality depth for this Texas offensive line? We're talking about grades. I've been grading all these groups. I got to give them an A. They got tons of talent, tons of experience. We've seen a lot of college offensive lines that you look back on and you talk about how dominant they were. You remember those mid-90s Nebraska teams that just triple option and power ISO'd people to absolute death? I mean, they beat the piss out of people, and they did it by just running a high school offense over and over and over again. And it was because that offensive line for those teams was just so good, so dominant, so powerful. You got those late 90s Texas offensive lines that paved the way for Ricky Williams and Cedric Benson to just put up insane numbers on their careers. Alabama and Georgia lately have had offensive lines that have really carried those teams offensively. I think you look at this offensive line for Texas, they have that type of ability. There's that type of potential for that group to definitely be one that we talk about, say, in 20 years and go, man, you're sitting around having some beers, and somehow the subject of offensive line comes up. I don't know. Probably in some circles that happens more than others, but uh, it'll happen in 20 years. It's going to happen for some of y'all. And maybe this is one of those offensive lines you can look back on and say, man, y'all remember that 2024 offensive line, how good they were? They got that type of potential. And obviously, they certainly have the potential to keep Ewers clean, keep his jersey clean, create great running room for this talented running back room. Uh, I don't I don't think, I don't know if it's going to be one we can talk about in 20 years as one of the best ever, but I don't think it's going to be one where we talk about, man, we really missed on that one. I think they're going to come in and have a really solid year for this Texas Longhorn offense, and again, it's going to be pivotal that they do for this offense to go. SEC Media Days, man. First Texas Longhorns trip to the SEC Media Days happened in Dallas, Texas. That was kind of cool. Uh, Big deal always at the SEC Media Days. Kind of a circus. I am going to go to the SEC Media Days next year if I can get credentials. So put that on your calendar. We definitely plan to be there, and I'm assuming it'll be back over. I think they do it in Atlanta most times. Maybe I'm wrong on that. I'm new to the SEC, y'all, so don't call me out for not knowing all the things about the SEC. But let's start with Sark, man. Sark takes the stage, and by the way, really cool background for Texas that the SEC threw up there on the screen. I don't I don't know. I was just drawn to it. I think it looked like a jersey almost. Had the little perforations in it. Really cool looking background. But Sark gets up there and immediately, starts talking about. Well, first of all, he thanked Nick Saban again, and I think that's cool because I don't think you can thank people enough that have done things like Coach Saban did for Coach Sarkisian to sort of help him turn his life around. Um, and so the way that Sark never misses an opportunity to thank Coach Saban, whether it's publicly or on a podcast or on a TV interview, or just probably talking to people during the course of his day to day life. I think that's really cool. Coach Saban has definitely impacted a lot of people. You look at that stage, a lot of guys on that stage coach for Coach Saban in the very near, like not too long ago. So I think that's awesome. He then started talking about respect for the SEC, and he it was kind of cool. He didn't mention just the conference and say the SEC. I mean, he made a point. We respect all the coaches. We respect all the teams and institutions, the players. We respect all the opposing fans. He really made it a point to say, hey, we know this place is awesome. It's the premier college football conference. It's the premier baseball conference. Probably overall, it's the premier athletic conference in college sports. Um, he made it clear that he realizes that, and he knows he's not coming into a situation um, where we just think we're going to run the show or something like that. So I thought that was cool, and I thought it was very intentional the way he talked about each one of those groups specifically. Uh, Coach Sark, Coach Sark is a really good speaker, man. I used to think Mac Brown was kind of slick in sort of that good old boy way, and he was. But man, Coach Sark has got it down to a T, and I don't know if that's just his. I don't know if that's just him or if he picked that up with Pete Carroll and Nick Saban, or maybe in the probably not in the NFL. I mean, they don't talk that much in front of people like that, but he does a really good job. He talked about this Texas team's obsession with winning, and he alluded to that at the end of last season, saying, "I am obsessed with winning a championship." But what he talked about during the media days was how this obsession in the program right now is really coming from the players. They are putting in the work to get this done. These guys want to go win a championship as much as um, Stark does, and as much as he's obsessed with doing that, these guys are even more obsessed, and that's exciting to hear. And I don't think that's lip service. You look at where this team was when Sark took it over to where it was at the end of last season, and granted, that Sugar Bowl loss sucked. Nobody wants to go lose the Sugar Bowl, miss out on an opportunity to go to the national championship. But that was a completely different team than we had in Sark's first year. And that's a lot due to the players just buying in and having to go through all that shit. And he talked about that too, a whole lot. Um, he talked about how this is the deepest team he's had in Austin, how he's really excited about that. Uh, Got to have depth, man. The difference between, excuse me, let me take a drink. Wet my whistle there a little bit. Sorry, folks. The difference between a really, really good team, a championship team, and just a team that looks good occasionally is depth. And he's talking about now how he's got 2 and 3 guys at each position that can play. So that's exciting to hear. They brought 3 guys to the SEC Media Days: Quinn Ewers, Kelvin Banks, and Judd A. Barron. Uh, he said Quinn is exuding confidence right now. He said you walk into a room and that's our guy. That's a quote. That's Quinn Ewers for this Texas football team. So that's good stuff to hear. Uh, Leadership's important, and that wasn't something that. And I'm not picking at him about it, but when Quinn first got on campus, he wasn't much of a leader. Uh, he was just the arm. He was just the gunslinger. But now he's changed a lot, and we'll talk about that a little more too. He goes on to talk about Kelvin Banks and um, his leadership, and if you're a young guy coming into the program, and you want to emulate somebody, he said, go emulate that guy. Quote from Steve Sarkisian. And he talked about Jahdae Barron being heady and a leader in the locker room. How he's really excited to get him back. So that's all good stuff, man. You got to have leadership, got to have talent, and I think this Texas team, obviously heavy on talent, but I think that leadership that they've got coming back, man. I think it's going to be super important. I think if Texas has a really good year, and I think a lot of people expect that they will, we expect that they will. A lot of it's going to be because of all that leadership. I mean, this stuff is underrated. You're not going to take a lot of freshmen, throw them together, and go win a championship. I don't care how good they are. I mean, you look at what Deion Sanders is trying to do at Colorado. That's what he's trying to do. He's trying to bring in all these guys that are really talented guys, or the most talented guys he can get, and try to throw them all together with no culture. And you saw what happened. They went out and went 4-8. So it'll be interesting to see if Colorado can bounce back from that this season. Sark goes on to talk about the coordinator continuity. He's had Coach Flood, the OC. He's had Coach K, the DC. Jeff Banks has been there as the Special Forces coordinator. I call them Special Forces. Man, yeah, that's super important. Having those guys, having to not change everything for the entirety of your career as a football player is a huge bonus. So it's absolutely pivotal for the team to maintain that. Now you look at guys like Coach Saban, who's had to replace. I think Coach Saban has had to replace more coordinators than any coach ever will in the history of college football. But he did it really well, and I think a lot of that is just because of his process, and he got those guys to come in and buy into his process. Uh, so it almost was a top down type thing. It'd be really interesting to see from Alabama. Alabama's going to be talented, and they've got a talented coaching staff, but will they have that same sort of dynamic from that top down dynamic like they had when Saban was there? Not sure. He talked about the standard being the standard, and that means culture, which they've clearly changed. It means competing for championships, which they've clearly done. And he says our goal is to come in here and try to win the SEC. And then he talked about a quote that he's and this is a cool quote. Heard it before, seen it before, but it was cool to hear that Coach Sark saw that when he first got to Texas, brought it into his office, and is really sort of bought into that. The pride and winning tradition at the University of Texas shall not be entrusted to the weak nor the timid. That says a lot. I mean, a few words says a whole lot about what it's like to be a player and be a coach at the University of Texas. And I think he has taken that to absolute heart. And he's got these kids, call them kids. They're not really kids. They're younger. They're young men. He's got these young men bought into that. And it's really starting to pay off on the field. He talked about it's good to have the rivalries back at Texas. I mean, obviously, he said it. How many teams do you know that get to play 3 rivalry games a season? And we won't get to do that every season, but we're certainly going to get to do it this season. And that's a benefit of realignment for Texas. A lot of benefits to realignment for Texas, but that's certainly for the fans of Texas and for the fans of those other universities. Those are, as much as they say they don't care, they absolutely care. It's going to be a big deal headed into Kyle Field in November. It's going to be a big deal those times we get to play Arkansas. He went on to say we're going to play more wide receivers. He got asked specifically about the wide receivers. So we're playing more. Got a lot of talent there. I got a lot of guys I can trust. And he mentioned Ryan Wingo specifically, and I thought that was interesting. Last week we had Eric Henry of Horns 247 on the show. We talked about the wide receivers, and I kept trying to get him to say Ryan Wingo was going to get to play because I think Ryan Wingo is going to be a big part of this offense. I just think he's so big and fast and just adjusts to the ball so well. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see, but I kept trying to get him to say it, and Eric wouldn't say it, and then Sark kind of said it without saying it. I think he really likes what he's got in Wingo, Uh, we'll just have to see. That's my. I think Wingo's gonna play a lot this year, unless something crazy happens. Who knows? He talked about Quinn Ewers being the coolest guy in the room. I've said that before. I remember Quinn's freshman year was the year I hadn't started this podcast, but I was doing TikTok videos and stuff like that, and I think I did a TikTok video about how Quinn Ewers is so level headed, especially for his age. You just don't see that a lot. Um, there is no ups, there is no downs. There's just what it is. He almost looks the same when they score a touchdown as he does when he throws a pick six. Kind of called him. I didn't mean this negatively, but I called him a sociopath. I mean, he's just there. And Sark mentioned that in this press conference, and I think it's dead on, man. Quinn is just. It's one of his. It's a thing you can't teach. You can't teach high strung people to not be high strung. You're born that way or you're not. And I think it can be. It's not always a positive thing, but I think on a football field, as a starting quarterback, just not being so caught up in the moment, moving on to the next thing, it can be a really huge positive. I think it has been for Quinn. He talked about that first year at Texas, 5-7 in Austin, Texas sucks. Absolutely, it does. Uh, but he also kind of rolled that into a positive, and that's what I love about Sark. He's not afraid to talk about the negative things, but he'll figure out a way to tie that into something positive. And what he tied it into during this presser was the 25 guys he thinks are leaders on this team, the guys that have been there since that 5-7 season, the guys that have been through all of that crap. They've seen the terrible, they've gone through the terrible, but they've also seen what hard work does. It wins you a Big 12 championship. It gets you in the college football playoff and gets you a few plays away maybe from winning the Sugar Bowl and moving on to a national championship berth. He's got guys that have been there and done that, and that's huge. Olin Buchanan, and we're gonna do like I'm gonna do like a special video about this because I read Olin Buchanan's article about Steve Sarkisian's answer, and I don't want to get into it during this show, but we will get into it. He asked Steve Sarkisian what's so special about the Red River Shootout, and I thought Coach Sark's answer was really awesome. You could go a lot of different ways with that answer, and I thought his answer was really good. He started off by saying it's the most unique game for sure that I've ever been a part of. He didn't say it was the most unique game in college football. He said, "I've been at USC. I played in these games. I played in the Apple Cup at Washington. I play, we've coached at the Iron Bowl." It, he said all those things. That he said it's the most unique game for sure that I've ever been a part of. And then he went on to say, half the game is a home game, and the other half of the game is a road game. And I've never really heard anybody put it that way. Everybody talks about the 50-50 split right down the 50-yard line at the Red River Shootout as being one of the unique things and cool things about that game. But I don't think – and everybody knows you get down to the OU side. If you're Texas, it's loud. You get down to the Texas side. If you're OU, it's loud. But I don't think I've ever heard anybody put it the way he put it. Half the game is a home game. The other half of the game is a road game. And so I thought it was just a really simple and unique way to answer that question about a very unique game. He then goes on to talk about the Texas A&M game, how the players are excited about that. They're going to be more excited about it than the coaches, probably because most of these guys are from this area. And he even mentioned it. They've been on recruiting trips with a lot of guys that probably play for this A&M team. So that's going to be awesome. He talked about, the week in and week out effort it's going to take to be successful in the SEC. So just a really good, I thought, a really good press conference. I thought he killed it, actually. Again, we talked about it earlier. Just he is such a good speaker, is able to articulate his thoughts. He's a thinking man. You can tell that, and you should know it just by the way his offenses are. But I think even outside of that, there's been some thinking guys, football wise, that probably weren't thinking guys in their personal lives and things like that. And you can really tell that Sark is. I think contrary to Olin Buchanan and all these moron Aggies out there that probably didn't even listen to the presser. They just saw some select quotes. I thought Steve Sarkisian gave a ton of respect to the SEC and its members and the fans of other institutions and those players and other teams. I thought he went out of his way to do that. But I thought he also said, you know, he made it clear publicly that we're coming in here to try to win this thing. We're not intimidated by joining the SEC. Uh, our goal is to win it. We know it's a great place to be. We know it's a tough place to play, but we want to come win it. And I thought that sent a great message from the podium to his players and to the rest of his staff. And you used to see Nick Saban do that stuff all the time, and he clearly took that playbook, that page out of the playbook from Nick Saban. The suit was fire, by the way, too. Love that suit. Might get one. I used to be a sport coat kind of guy. I might get me one of those burn orange sport coats for a cold game. We'll have to see. Quinn had a short presser. They asked him what the most undervalued thing about Sark was, and I thought his answer was awesome. His vulnerability with his players, uh, the culture that they've built of trust and it's okay to fail as long as you learn from those failures. Man, that's some good stuff, dude, and that's like next level stuff. Uh, we didn't have that when I played high school and college football. We didn't have coaches that would get vulnerable with you and get to know you and make you understand that it's okay to fail. We got hollered at a lot and did a lot of bear crawls and stuff like that to correct our issues. But yeah, man, Sark's taking a different approach to that, and you can tell that the players like it. Someone asked him about his role as a Texas quarterback. Obviously, lots of pressure there, he says, but he's really excited for that opportunity, and I think that's a great answer. He's ready for year 3. Uh, they talked about his NFL. You know, why did you come back? Excuse me. Why'd you come back to Texas instead of making it to the NFL? And I thought his answer there was great too. Uh, he said he wanted to come back to Texas to give himself a better shot at a lasting NFL career. And he mentioned some data, 25 starts. He said right around 25 starts in college, you'd see a huge uptick in success, longevity of guys that are above that mark versus guys that are below that mark. And surely that came from Steve Sarkisian, who is not only trying to get these guys to play well on the field for him, but get them prepared to go do it at other places professionally. Uh, Watching Quinn in this media days versus some of the interviews he gave when he first got to Texas, just night and day, man. The guy is more confident. You can tell he's bought into what Steve Sarkisian is selling. And I think that's awesome, man. And again, I think it paid dividends last year when he made some changes headed into that 2023 season. And I think again, as we head into this 2024 season, it's gonna be a big deal for this Texas squad. Overall reactions, man, a lot of questions about the rivalries, which I thought was kind of cool. I know that I know that fans of other SEC teams are probably sick of hearing about, the Red River Shootout, Aggie game, and probably to a lesser extent that Arkansas game, but those are big games. Those are fan bases that hate each other, like legit hate each other. And so to have those types of games back, I mean, I don't understand the defensive nature of the SEC, the legacy SEC and their whole wanting to put down the Red River Shootout. To me, whether it's the best or not isn't what matters. What is cool is that you now have, as a conference, some of the most storied, historic, unique, amazing, hateful rivalries. You just added another one. Actually, you really added 3 right off the jump, man. Texas and Arkansas, they're not the same programs right now. And there's been times where they haven't been the same programs and the games haven't been competitive. I mean, just a few years ago, you saw Texas go up there in Sark's first season and just get fucking pummeled by just a more physical offensive line, more physical defensive front for Arkansas. I mean, they just beat Texas up in the trenches. They weren't the same programs. But we've seen a lot of Arkansas and Texas games where that game has determined who wins the national championship before. And those fan bases, I think it's more so on the Arkansas side than the Texas side. Not that Texas fans just love Arkansas fans, but it's chippy, and that Texas A&M rivalry is chippy, and we all know that Texas OU rivalry is chippy. So I think the SEC should embrace that. The fans should embrace that. Stop trying to make it seem like Texas is coming in and saying, y'all finally got a rivalry in the SEC. We all know about the Iron Bowl. We all know about the cocktail party. We know about that stuff. One thing I thought was really cool about listening to Sark and Quinn talk was the messaging. You can tell that these aren't just things these guys are saying in press conferences. Like they're saying the same things about consistency and having to go into the SEC and be consistent. They're saying those things in different ways and from different contexts. And I thought that was really interesting. It's one thing to say a lot of stuff. Anybody can say a lot of stuff. Anybody can say what somebody else wants to hear. But it's being able to get that and permeate that through a group of kids, a group of young men, and have them all so much on the same page that it doesn't really matter what the question is. If it's relatable, they're going to say that. That's big time. And that's what Sark has got going on there at the University of Texas right now. That's the show for today, folks. Thanks for hanging out with us. We really enjoyed it. I love talking to those offensive linemen. Y'all know I do. We will come back next week and flip over to the defensive side of the ball. We're going to start skill guys first. We're going to talk about the secondary. Then we'll talk about the linebackers. Then we'll talk about those defensive linemen. Don't forget about our Texas football ticket giveaway. Details are on Twitter at Horn Takes. There's a pinned post in my profile. You just go to Horn Takes, go to the profile. There's a pinned post, tells you everything you got to do. We're racing for 2,000. Check us out on Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube at Horn Takes. Give us a subscribe or a follow. Won't cost you guys a thing. We appreciate the support. Email me at horntakespodcast@gmail.com with all your questions, comments, concerns, or criticisms. I love them all. You guys have a good weekend. Get hooked.